Diagonally across the street is Franklin Park at the corner of Blue Hill Ave and Seaver Street. It came together in the mid-1880s by the great landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted, and it is a 527-acre park. It is the largest park in the Boston area and one of the largest in Massachusetts. The Franklin Park Zoo becomes part of this story in 1912. Olmsted's vision for parks was very democratic, as in small d democratic. He saw parks being for all people, not just the elegant wealthy that drive through the park in their horse-drawn carriage, but for people who are living at the edges of the park, in the three-deckers, in the apartment buildings, that this is going to be their place to go in the summertime to enjoy recreational activities. And he also had a very painterly vision for his parks. And in some of his other parks, he did things like he created hills where there had never been hills. He got rid of hills in some other parts of the area. And he was literally working like a painter, creating kind of like a new landscape. In Franklin Park, he didn't do that so much because the city was trying to not make this be a tax prohibitive project. So the mantra became keep it simple. So he didn't do too much reinventing the landscape, and he did more in the way of celebrating the landscape, putting in gardens, and making much of something called Schoolmaster Hill, which is in Franklin Park, which was where Ralph Waldo Emerson, the transcendentalist, had a small house when he taught for a time out in the countryside of Roxbury and Dorchester. So that is a great park across the street. But I also want to point out across the way the Seaver Apartments. And this Seaver word that you see a lot out this way, Ebenezer Seaver was a United States representative from the area. And his heyday was the mid-19th century. He was a landowner, and so Seaver Street is remembering his service as a politician. And so across the way is a 19-teens apartment building called the Seaver. And what this speaks to is 10 years into the story of the Jewish community coming out here to Grove Hall from the old West End, the North End, the North Slope of Beacon Hill. And many of them have done well in various businesses, like particularly clothing stores. Many of these Jewish families started off as peddlers in the streets of Boston. And so they through dint of hard work and saving their money, they are able to come out to the new suburbs, and they're moving into buildings such as what we see across the street. And in 1906, famously, the first temple out here is constructed further down Blue Hill Avenue. And by 1930, there's a population figure of 77,000 Jews living in the Dorchester, Roxbury area. So it was one of the big three Jewish areas. Just in terms of an architectural style, you've got a lot of stylistic influences on a building like this. You've got the basement has what's called rusticated stone. By rustication, you can clearly see the joints in the blocks, and it's something that's coming out of Renaissance architecture. But not only is it called rustication, but it's called rock-faced rustication because you're not refining the blocks. That's almost like it came out of the ground with this kind of roughness on the blocks. And then above it is red brick. Red brick is the historic, much-loved building material of the city. And then you have a very handsome entrance with a very Georgian Revival kind of Ionic columned entrance porch with an entablature directly above the entrance door, and then this pediment, which is ultimately coming out of ancient design. And then you've got these elegant Ionic capitaled pilasters, the vertical elements. You can think of a pilaster as a flattened, purely decorative, almost like a column, but flat and not really supporting anything. It's just for show. And then the windows have what are called splayed lintels above the windows, with a corner with a keystone in the center. So it's this kind of mix and match thing where you're going to have a little bit of Renaissance Revival, a little bit of the Georgian influence, and a great form to this building that's taking this very commanding, authoritative position on this corner.